Bonnie Parker and Clyde Champion Barrow were American criminals whose lives and deaths became inseparable from the social and economic collapse of the United States during the Great Depression. Their story unfolded at a time when the country was experiencing unprecedented hardship, marked by mass unemployment, bank failures, and a growing sense that traditional institutions no longer protected ordinary citizens. In this environment, crime took on new meanings, and figures like Bonnie and Clyde were able to gain national attention in ways that would have been impossible in earlier decades. Clyde Champion Barrow was born in 1909 into a poor farming family in Texas. From an early age, his life was defined by instability. The Barrow family moved frequently in search of work, eventually settling in West Dallas, an area known for poverty and crime. Clyde's early offenses were minor, consisting mostly of automobile thefts and small burglaries. These crimes were common among young men with few economic options, but repeated arrests pushed Clyde deeper into the criminal justice system. Clyde's time in prison marked a decisive turning point. At the Eastham Prison Farm, a Texas penal institution known for its harsh conditions, Clyde endured forced labor, physical abuse, and sexual violence. These experiences profoundly altered his psychology. Rather than rehabilitating him, the prison system intensified his anger and resentment toward authority. Clyde later expressed a desire not simply to avoid prison, but to actively fight the institutions that had humiliated and broken him. After his parole in 1932, he emerged more violent, more organized, and more committed to a criminal lifestyle than before. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker was born in 1910, also in Texas, and her early life followed a different trajectory. She was academically capable and artistically inclined, with a strong interest in writing and poetry. Bonnie married at a young age, but her husband was soon incarcerated for murder, leaving her effectively alone during the early years of the Depression. Economic opportunities for young women were limited, and social mobility was rare. Bonnie worked intermittently as a waitress, but struggled to find stability or purpose. Bonnie met Clyde in January 1930, and their relationship developed quickly. Their bond was emotional, intense, and rooted in shared feelings of frustration and exclusion. Bonnie's involvement in Clyde's crimes increased gradually. While later portrayals often exaggerated her role as an armed participant, historical evidence suggests that her primary involvement was logistical and emotional rather than tactical. She traveled with Clyde, endured life on the run, and remained loyal despite severe injuries, hunger, and constant danger. Together, Bonnie and Clyde committed a range of crimes, including automobile theft, armed robbery, burglary, and kidnapping. Contrary to popular belief, they rarely robbed banks, and many of their crimes yielded little financial gain. Their survival depended heavily on stolen vehicles, particularly Ford automobiles, which Clyde favored for their speed and reliability. This constant movement across state lines allowed them to evade local law enforcement, but eventually brought them under federal scrutiny. The involvement of the federal government began through a technical violation rather than direct violence. When investigators traced a stolen automobile across state lines, using evidence such as an abandoned prescription bottle linked to Clyde's family, the Bureau of Investigation gained jurisdiction under federal auto theft laws. This marked a significant moment in American law enforcement history, as it demonstrated the growing role of federal agencies in crimes that extended beyond local boundaries. As their activities intensified, Bonnie and Clyde were occasionally accompanied by other criminals. These associations were unstable and short-lived. Clyde's brother Buck Barrow joined the group briefly after receiving a full pardon in 1933, along with his wife Blanche. Buck's presence increased the group's visibility and risk. Blanche, unprepared for a life of violence, lived in constant fear. A major shootout in Iowa resulted in Buck's death and Blanche's capture, effectively ending any illusion of group cohesion. Media coverage played a central role in transforming Bonnie and Clyde from regional criminals into national figures. Photographs recovered by police showing Bonnie posing with firearms were widely published. At a time when newspapers were the dominant source of information, these images shaped public imagination. For some Americans, Bonnie and Clyde appeared as symbols of defiance against banks and authority. This perception persisted despite the growing number of violent encounters associated with the couple. By 1933 and early 1934, the level of violence escalated significantly. Several police officers were killed during roadside stops and attempted arrests. These incidents shifted public opinion and hardened law enforcement strategy. What had once been a pursuit aimed at capture became a mission focused on elimination. Coordination between local police, state authorities, and federal agents increased, reflecting a broader transformation in American policing. Clyde's actions during this period further solidified his status as a major threat. In January 1934, he led a violent prison break at the Eastham Prison Farm, freeing multiple inmates and killing guards in the process. This event directly challenged the authority of the Texas prison system and intensified the urgency of the manhunt. From this point forward, Clyde was considered irredeemable by authorities. Bonnie and Clyde's physical condition deteriorated during their final months. Bonnie suffered severe burns from a car accident involving battery acid, leaving her in constant pain and limited mobility. Both were exhausted, wounded, and increasingly isolated. Their movements became predictable as they relied on a shrinking network of contacts, particularly in Louisiana. On May 23, 1934, after months of surveillance and coordination, law enforcement officers ambushed Bonnie and Clyde on a rural road near Sales, Louisiana. Officers concealed themselves in the surrounding brush and opened fire without warning as the couple approached in their vehicle. The ambush lasted only seconds. Both Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were killed instantly. The aftermath revealed the public's complex relationship with crime and spectacle. Crowds gathered around the scene, touching the vehicle, collecting souvenirs, and taking photographs. Newspapers published graphic images nationwide. Bonnie and Clyde, once fugitives, became permanent fixtures of American folklore. Historically, their story illustrates more than individual criminality. It reveals the consequences of economic collapse, the failures of early 20th century penal systems, and the power of mass media to reshape reality. Their legacy endures not because of the crimes themselves, but because their lives expose the fragile boundary between desperation and destruction in moments when society fails its most vulnerable.